One of the controversies that has emerged with the coming swearing in, scheduled for, is it the 20th, Kim, of this coming month, January? One of the coming controversies with the president-elect Donald Trump being sworn in is that he is an adjudicated insurrectionist. It was adjudicated in a Colorado court, and the evidence was laid out by the J6 committee. And so it's a violation of the Constitution to have someone like that sworn in as president. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of a legal scholar on this issue who joins us now and is part of an effort to at least create something of an awareness and maybe an impediment to Donald Trump being sworn in. How about it for Richard Green, the Civics team? Sir, thank you for being here.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. So these are critical days leading up to his inauguration, Donald Trump's inauguration. Tell me how this all lays out, the details of what seemed to be, this is a pretty serious thing that Trump was very much involved with, a fake elector scheme, a violent takeover, all of that. So the recent history is replete with evidence of this guy's insurrection, yet it appears that he's moving on to the presidency.
Well, I'm just about to post a letter of apology to President James Madison. And as those of you who studied civics, which would be 11 of you, James Madison was the father of the U.S. Constitution. And listen, nothing is going to happen. Donald Trump is going to be certified on January 6th. Donald Trump is going to be sworn in on January 20th. It's going to be way more than entertaining. It's going to be an experiment with American fascism, unlike anything we have seen in our country's history. And so a friend of mine, Jessica Denson, who used to work with the Donald Trump campaign, and she has quite an interesting history. She has organized a march, I think it's on January 3rd, in DC to help the members of Congress understand that they took an oath, their own oath, on January 3rd. They're taking an oath to uphold the Constitution. That's the only you take. You do not take an oath to Donald Trump. You sadly do not take an oath to Mark Thompson. You take an oath to the Constitution. And the reason that I'm writing a letter of apology to President James Madison is because the Constitution could not be more clear that what the members of Congress must do on January 6th is not certify the election of an insurrectionist. And you went through the examples of that. And the Supreme Court didn't really address that. We can talk about that. And it would be exactly like the United States Congress certifying the election of someone who was 27 years old, or someone like Elon Musk or Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was not born in the United States, or someone who had not been a resident of the United States for 14 years. And that's it. Those are the only requirements up until 1868. And in 1868, 30 years after James Madison's death, the 15th Amendment was created. And in relevant part, in Section 3, it says, no person shall hold any office under the United States who, having previously taken an oath. And what is the oath for? The oath is to obey the Constitution of the United States, as an officer of the United States to support the Constitution of the United States, who shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. That's it. That is a requirement. So you have to be at least 35 You have to be a natural born citizen. You have to have been a resident of the United States for 14 years. And you can't have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States Constitution.
So, is there
I,
any? Yeah, it's you're saying, look, it's open and shut. As you that I love your examples, which it's like any violation of the Constitution. Now, as noted in our chat, I think along the way, if this isn't enforced by, well, Congress is really the body that's charged with enforcing it, then it goes through. And Congress, cowed completely by Trump and honestly having gained power. I mean, if you're in the GOP, your guy won. So, I mean, you sort of have an interest, it would seem, a vested interest in seeing him sworn in regardless.
Yeah, now there are two things that can happen. One is Congress could take care of this very simply under the 14th Amendment and be in compliance with the Constitution, because at the end of Section 3, it says, but Congress may by a vote of 2/3 of each house, that's the House and the Senate, remove such disability. So, for example, if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was elected president at the age of 30, she could still be president if Congress, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, voted to remove such disability. Most people don't talk about that. So Elon Musk could be president if 2/3 of Congress votes to remove such disability. So that is unlikely that would happen, because you would have some Republicans who, are not going to allow one thing, or Democrats who are not going to allow the other. The other thing that's interesting is under the 2022 revision to the Electoral Count Act, you need 20% of the House to put forth an objection to any slate of electors. So how this could go down if there was slightly a different composition of the House or Senate is that someone would stand up and say, I object to Texas, the 40 electoral votes for Donald Trump being counted because they were not cast. The electors did not cast these votes in proper manner because they voted for someone who is not capable of being president of the United States. It then goes to a majority vote of both houses. And then if the majority says, yes, we agree with that objection, then Donald Trump doesn't get those 40 electoral college votes of Texas, and so on and so on. He only needs to be stripped of enough electoral college votes to get below Kamala Harris's 236.
Sure.
If they stripped him of enough to get below 236, Kamala Harris would be the next president of the United States, not J.D. Vance.
That's wild. This is just it's a wild scenario. It feels very John Grisham novel. It feels very it's even though, and that's why I'm so glad we're talking to you, because the constitutional and legal underpinnings are so solid, coming through you. But it's clearly something that is so outside what the Democrats would do, what the political machine would do, right, Richard? That's why this effort feels, on one level, let me be clear, doomed to failure. That is from a practical standpoint. But on another level, I always feel, make noise about it, talk about it, get it out there. It's important that you make noise and you make your case so that people are at least aware of this stuff. Some of what you just mentioned, I had no idea about that. You can, deny the electoral college votes of a certain state and, here and there actually, work that part of the game.
Well, that's been around for a while. It used to be, before the Electoral Count Act amendment in 2022, that you needed one senator and one House member, right? And that's actually been employed several times. But now they said, hold on, we need more, we need 20%. But the main point, first of all, you and I have talked about, was the election fair, right? Did the greatest technologist in the history of mankind, who can literally drive my Tesla remotely, use code to remotely affect the counting of the election in the key 7 swing states, which were all won remarkably by Donald Trump. So that that horse has left the barn. The Democrats didn't want to fight that battle. The Democrats, Jamie Raskin has made some sounds about this. There's no appetite to do it because Jamie Raskin, in a video that went around, said if we did this, we would all need bodyguards. So the bottom line, Mark, is the reason, there are 2 reasons nothing's happening. And all I'm saying is, listen, I went to law school. I took a year of constitutional law, right? Every lawyer did, right? It says what it says, okay? And I'm just pointing it out and kind of want to rub everybody's nose in it. But there's that. But I understand it's not going to happen. And in part, it's not going to happen because the Democratic Party is a bunch of sissies. And that's one of the reasons that they lost. One of the reasons they lost is that people want a strong alpha leader, whether it's a male or a female. They want an alpha leader because then they feel safe, they feel protected. Democrats do not have balls. We just don't, and it's a problem. But the other reason is that the other side has engaged in a level of political violence that we have never seen in this country. And I do blame Donald Trump for that. And I do blame Steve Bannon for that. And I do blame, Fox News for that and whatever. And the truth is, if in fact you're going to stand up and object, and then you're going to have a bodyguard for the next, 10 years of your life, protecting you and your family, on a human level, I can understand that, but that's where we are.
Yeah, the physical intimidation is a real thing. They're worried about it. They're scared. They're scared for their own physical safety.
I mean, look what happened to Nancy Pelosi's wife. Look, I mean, this is a real thing.
Sure.
Nancy Pelosi's husband, sorry.
I have a quick question for you, Richard Green, the Civics Dean. It is that the whole question of whether Trump was able to run, wasn't that tackled in Arizona? And the Supreme Court of Arizona said, we've decided that either Congress needs to act or the people need to decide. Did that not happen?
So in Colorado, the Supreme Court said we can take Donald Trump off the ballot because we have a jury has adjudicated that he has committed insurrection. The Supreme Court, by a vote of 9-0, said that what the 14th Amendment does is gives Congress the ability to enforce this, not the states. The states can enforce it for their own state officers. So someone running for governor or secretary of state or whatever, that is relevant, right? They can push out an insurrectionist there, but they cannot do it for a national candidate.
I'm seeing this. Colorado, says Raleigh. Yeah, Colorado is what we refer to when we talk about Colorado. Richard, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but it was about, just if you can get into your time machine and go back a little bit before the election, it was about whether or not, as an insurrectionist and an adjudicated insurrectionist, again, with all the evidence that was laid bare in all these different forums, J6, congressional investigation, et cetera, whether or not you could, and it was a complete case. They brought the case in Colorado, whether or not you could argue effectively, and whether the court would rule that Donald Trump should not appear on the ballot as a presidential option because of his insurrectionist past. So that's why we keep talking about Colorado. But what Richard's saying is that when the Colorado case kind of got booted, the Arizona case really got booted, is what you're saying, Richard. And they said, hey, the feds can do this. We really can't. The power of the state isn't here to do it.
This is clearly a federal issue for the presidential race, right?
Yeah.
And that was a 9-0 by the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Colorado had it right. He can't actually hold office, so why even put him on the ballot, says Lawless One. Why put the people through that? Well, and then he got on the ballot, and as we've seen, something happened. I mean, it was a remarkable thing. Just because
now, there is an argument. There is an argument, and it was made, but it was rejected by the Supreme Court, that the Congress, at least the House of Representatives, actually did adjudicate that he was guilty of insurrection and impeached him for it. But
Sure.
as we know, in America, impeachment is like an indictment. It's like an arrest warrant. It is not a verdict. And had the Senate, this is why everyone's saying, McConnell, come on, man, you don't like this guy, let's get rid of him. Had the Senate had a few more votes to actually convict Donald Trump of that impeachable offense that the House said he committed, then for sure he would not have been able to run.
Yeah, yeah. So, this is all good. I'm looking at different comments. Blue Sparks says, I think Trump did win. I spent a lot of time in Trumper country, and the masses there firmly believe all problems are Biden's fault, and Trump will fix everything. They swallow the Kool-Aid from Fox, etc. I like that comment for the question that I'm going to ask you, and here's what it is. It's that we're in our own way in an echo chamber and siloed. We saw the Kamala Harris rallies overflowing with an enthusiasm that we thought seemed to be carrying her, certainly in polling. She had pulled even with Trump, even ahead of Trump in some places. I guess we had seen such tremendous momentum in such a short time that it seemed inconceivable, and still, frankly, remains somewhat inconceivable, that she would lose sort of a run-of-the-table kind of victory that Trump claims, that she would lose that run of the table the way she did. And so it does, to harken back to something else you said, it does make you wonder exactly why the Democrats didn't ask for a paper ballot recount in a couple of instances. That certainly would have exposed any kind of data breach or other manipulation, right?
And the thing, listen, I know it's not determinative, but can someone explain to me why Donald Trump kept saying, we don't need you to vote. We don't need any more votes. I mean, I know that's not the smoking gun we're all looking for, but can someone explain that? And
Well,
can someone explain why, hold on one second, why
Yeah.
Elon Musk told Attorney General Paxton from Texas that we're going to win all 7 swing states before the election, and that Paxton is saying at the CPAC conference, use your Star Wars sort of thing. We're so glad he's on our side. I mean, it just feels icky to me, and I just want all paper ballots to be counted in all elections so that everything is certain.
Well, I completely agree. And I would just say this about the rhetoric, because parsing the rhetoric can be a crazy game. So I'll start with the Trump stuff. I don't know that he didn't mean, vote me in and I'll solve all your problems. You'll never have to vote again. I saw that when he was speaking at that Christian conference. That was sort of his vibe. I can play the
but then
other
he said we don't even need the votes this time.
Yeah. I don't remember. Is that right, what he said? I remember saying, if you vote, you'll never have to vote again, I thought is what he said. No?
He literally said, Rachel Maddow did a big piece on it showing like 4 or 5 clips where he goes, you know what, we have all the votes we need. We don't even need you to vote. He literally said
that's
it's
pretty
just weird,
Yeah, that is weird. The thing I could say if I wanted to represent Trump in this, I would say, well, if you really felt he didn't need the votes, Richard Green, he wouldn't have stormed the country from rally to rally the way he did. I mean, he really went after it in the last 2 weeks of the election. He was trying to get votes out. He did Rogan's show, I think, twice. I mean, he was working hard as a candidate. If he didn't need the votes, why did he do that? You could say, well, he was just covering for the fact, all right, I'm just saying, I don't know about it. I do, however, put some stock in what you've suggested Elon Musk said, because I feel as though Musk really did have access to information before anyone else. We heard Rogan talk about the fact that he knew these results 4 hours before anything appeared on the screen. I ran that video here. And I'm not at all persuaded that Musk didn't have a big hand in the outcome here. Here you go. Tony's found it for you. Why in the world does Trump keep saying we don't need the votes? this is an interesting question, you know.
So here's one. So I wrote a piece on Substack why Kamala lost, and there were 22 reasons. Honestly, I think Democrats' policies about illegal immigration was number one. The Fox News, Trump, X, disinformation, lie infrastructure machine was number two. Number three was Democrats being too woke, and that, you know, Kamala's with they, them, Donald Trump is with you. Those are the three top reasons, in my opinion. But actually, there is a reason that's even bigger, which is Citizens United. And the fact that you have one human being who gets to have disproportionate, not one man, one vote influence on American elections by spending $250 million fucking dollars. I'm sorry. It's just, that is not what the founding fathers or anyone in this country wants, except for the billionaires. So
Of course, that's true. Of course. I mean, if you could get money out of politics, you would completely hit the reboot, reset button on our elections. There's no question about that.
And we can't. You want to know how we can?
Yes, this is the stuff that you're so good with. Go ahead.
Everything is just basic arithmetic in politics. That's why I love it. There is a piece of legislation, several pieces of legislation to reform the Supreme Court. You can either do a rotating thing where they serve every 2 years, they move from one seat to another like musical chairs, and a new president gets to choose one every 2 years, a new person, and within a short period of time, you elect Democratic presidents. That happens. Or you do what FDR wanted to do, and you, quote unquote, pack the courts, and you get a Democratic majority. They overturn Citizens United, right? And that's easy to do. And then you pass a law saying we're going to have public financing of campaigns, and there will be no individual person who can contribute anything, period. Otherwise, they're in violation of federal election laws, which I do believe that. I believe Elon Musk is also in violation of current laws, but the Trump Justice Department is certainly not going to prosecute.
Let me just follow up on that last thing, and then I'll double back to something else you said. The last thing is about the Elon Musk being in violation now of current campaign laws. Which ones?
I don't know, but you can't, in my opinion, you can't be bribing people to register to vote and then doing lotteries where you're giving $1 million to people, all definitely in favor of one candidacy.
Right, right.
I mean, that there's, if there's
I
not
thought
a
there
law,
was I thought there was a legal case brought, Richard, about that. No, at the time, it was certainly pointed out that it was a violation. And then remember, they did that kind of back and fill on it. They said, "Oh, it was, you know, it's really open to anybody. We're not trying to, you know." It was a weird dance they did.
Listen, we have never really enforced federal election laws properly. And part of that is because who's on the Federal Election Commission, it's like tied and you need to have a majority.
Right,
it's a freaking mess. It's
you also
mess,
you need a quorum, you need a certain number of people, and we've always been below that threshold. It's a system that's also manipulated within the system.
You know, one of the few things that that Americans are united on, Mark, is that we do not want dark money or really any big money influencing politics. We don't want to influence our politicians with lobbyists who can go to them every 2 years and bribe them. We certainly don't want what Elon is threatening to do. You vote for Donald Trump on this bill, or we're going to primary you, and I'm going to fund that person. I mean, think of the amount of money Elon Musk has to elect whoever he wants in the midterm.
Sure. Well, look at J.D. Vance. He was his Senate seat was purchased by Peter Thiel. I mean, there's no question. He was given $15 million in a senatorial election that, you know, that essentially carried it. You're so right, Richard. It should be public funding. This is a good question. I just want to ask you, can't a third party, Lanzetta says, cross-reference the Starlink and check for any discrepancies? Wouldn't Democrats have an army of lawyers, et cetera, who are prepared for this? It is true, Richard, we heard the Democrats have their own lawyers, and believe me, they're all lawyered up across the nation, and they're ready for whatever. Yet, everything passed and we never heard any sort of legal challenge or even request for recount.
There was a determination during the Jill Stein situation in 2016, where they determined that in order to be able to call for a recount, you had to be a mathematically in contention to win.
I see.
And Jill Stein was not. So no third party can force that. It really, it was up to Kamala Harris. It was up to Kamala Harris. And neither she nor Mark Elias nor the DNC felt like there was a good enough case. But it's a catch-22. How do you know if there's a good enough case unless you actually start counting even a small percentage of the paper ballots to make sure that they were tracking? And you and I have seen so many TikToks that had all these expert analyses, but nothing is accurate until you actually count the paper ballots, which is not that hard to do. Why do we have paper ballots if we're not going to count them, is my point.
Thank you. That's this is interesting. Monica says, well, I guess we are now a true oligarchy. The SCOTUS made this decision, and now we have to figure out how to get out of it. And, you know, SCOTUS is bought and paid for, too, as we find out. So we really are seeing our entire system succumb to big money, but I mean gargantuan money, and the failings of individuals. When it comes to money and threats of violence, those failings become pretty exposed, as you just said.
Well, the only thing that makes me a little bit happy, and Don Lemon is going viral because he did this huge rant about how stupid Trump people were. Egg prices are not going to go down. Bacon prices, people shouldn't be eating bacon anyway, except for veggie bacon. But bacon prices are not going to go down. Gas prices are not going to go down. The things that they sold America on are not going to happen. And maybe in the midterms, people are going to respond, and we're going to have an overwhelming landslide of Democrats who then would be in position with a new president in 2 years after that to actually make some real positive changes, get money out of politics, get healthcare to a whole nother level, ban assault weapons, on and on.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's a pretty significant wish list, but I do think the pendulum will swing back. I think there's no question the pendulum. I mean, if you allow the swing, that is to say, if the elections proceed in some legal way, then the pendulum will swing back. But you can do a lot of damage in that short time.
But as a quick caveat to that, even if there's massive will and massive disappointment in the Republicans, if you somehow have access to voting machines and you have access to $400 billion of Elon Musk's money, it makes winning elections very difficult.
Yeah, that's why I think we're all worried that this can't be undone, and that the future is going to be written in a very permanent way. Let me ask you about...
You wanted entertaining, Mark? We're going to have entertaining.
Well, I think, but again, I like that you're making noise about it. I like that there's a march, a gathering, a protest. I mean, this is important because it is... it's a noisy environment right now, and if you can make noise yourself about how this is a constitutional violation when it comes to the oath that will be delivered, I think you need to do it. And I had one last question. It's unrelated, but it was one of the things that just showed up last night, and I thought, I've got to ask Richard about this. You know, the sanctuary city thing that's going on in California. Trump is, through Stephen Miller primarily, is warning that the leaders who are associated with the sanctuary city protections in California cities could go to prison over this, that they will pursue legal remedies against all of those leaders. That's what they're threatening. Thought on that?
I believe they will.
Really?
If you've watched Stephen Miller, who is just, in my opinion, a despicable Santa Monica resident. I'm ashamed that he is our neighbor. And if you've watched the people who are going to take over the immigration policy in the United States, they seem unbelievably serious, and they seem like they have, or they feel like they have, an absolute mandate. And I'm kind of looking forward to that, to have the consequences of that, where food prices go up because there's nobody there to pick the food, restaurants close because they can't. I mean, all of this. But
Sure.
I think they're going to go ahead with it. I do think that they're going to prosecute every single person just to make a show of it and to intimidate people. It's all about intimidation legally, through presidential orders, and through violence. And, that's, again, when you have Mark Milley, the #1 military officer in the United States before the election, saying to the American people, Donald Trump is a fascist to the core, this is what fascism is all about.
Sure. I
And
think the problem is that
we're going to learn.
a lot of people who were voting in the election couldn't even spell fascist. I mean, I don't even mean that as like an insult to put them down. I mean that it was the wrong message or packaged the wrong way. I mean, I know it seems like an odd thing to say, but somebody has to explain what fascism means. I mean, it really is everything has to get a lot more basic when it comes to communicating. Look at how they hung on Kamala Harris, the whole trans thing, the cultural issues that are at the margins. Kamala Harris, it wasn't even in her platform anything about trans people, but they hung it successfully on her because that liberal cultural divide is so real, and they knew that they could exploit it, and they did.
But we are very much at fault on that. There's this debate within the Democratic Party. It's like you don't address the fake news and the allegations and the fake attacks that the Republicans make against you. You let them go because otherwise you're amplifying them. And I'd say, no, I have been insisting or begging my party, our party, to go, no, the border is not wide open. It could be more closed, but it's not wide open. We're sending back literally millions of people who are getting apprehended and sent back. That's not the definition of open. And no, we are not cutting off 8-year-old boys' penises during nutrition break in school. We're not doing that, right? And so this inability to fight back shows a lack of strength and terrible messaging. And we're letting the lying and deception and disinformation of Fox News and Elon Musk and Donald Trump to have a free hand. And that's just terrible messaging strategy, in my opinion.
I completely agree. In fact, Donald Trump doesn't let things just sit there. He addresses them. He says, "Oh, they've said, oh, now they're calling me this." Now, yeah. It's absolutely, you should cut these things down. And and that soundbite with her rejecting these ridiculous propositions, these ridiculous notions about where she is on various issues, that should have been out there. Look, I thought she ran a very for a short time, super compressed time, I thought she ran a very good campaign in many, many ways. A couple of missteps. Sadly, in that short time, a couple of missteps can be amplified, and I think that hurt her. I also feel as though this cake was baked, and then you and I agree that there's some questions on the results. I would have loved to have seen a paper ballot recount. So, and again, just to reiterate, I love that you are making noise about this the constitutionality of swearing in Donald Trump. So again, when is this organized march or protest?
Okay, go to 14th now. Anyway, Jessica Denson is just this extraordinarily impressive.
She's coming on the show. She's coming on the show, right? Yeah.
Pitbull of a former Republican. It is happening between the January 3, 4, and 5 in Washington, D.C. And it will not make a difference, but I do think it's important symbolically, Mark. So
Yes.
go to hashtag 14th information. Her name is Jessica Denson, DENSON. It's not going to make a difference. It's not going to cow enough Democrats to do the right thing. But the truth is, are we going to literally lay without even uttering a peep? Or are we at least going to rub the country's nose in the most sacred document that especially the Republicans seem to carry around with them and say, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're violating it in plain sight. So I think it's just important as a way of pushing back and saying, we're not going to lay down without at least making a noise. We're watching you, and maybe we're not going to win this battle, but we will continue to fight. And that's
nowmarch.org. Exactly. And I think that's exactly right. We're not lying down without giving up, without giving it a fight, even though we know it's going to be a losing fight from a bottom line standpoint in the end. I love that you're making noise. Richard, stay in touch, and good luck. Happy New Year. We'll have a lot to talk about, my friend. Yeah. Until next time. Richard Green, the Civics Dean, everybody.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.